And here's the good news, though. We have one heck of a grand finale lined up for you all, because to wrap up our megacast today, we will be chatting with Jeff Harbert, Director of Strategic Alliances Data Protection at Vast Data, and Mike Zolla, Technical Director, Data Protection, also at Vast Data. I am so excited to jump into what's going on at Vast, and as I said, we are already at the end. It's been a great day, and I know Jeff and Mike are really going to bring us home in style. So, Jeff, I'm going to kick things on over to you. Take it away.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I really hope that at the end of the day here, I can keep up with the energy you've got. At least give some entertainment here. Very impressed, for sure. Hey, thank you everyone for joining us here. I know it's been a long day already. Actually, I'm going to go to my next pretty picture here so you can see who we are. So my name is Jeff Harbert. Obviously joining me here is Mike Zolla as well. We're going to go through a little bit in terms of kind of the story of Vast, why we think you guys should be paying attention to us. But I wanted to start with a little bit of history. So before joining Vast, I have been doing consulting and managed services for about 20 years in data protection. And in that time, this slide has existed in some way, shape, or form. And it starts with kind of the concepts around a recovery plan. Whether you call it a disaster recovery plan, as you might have 10 or 15 years ago, or a ransom recovery plan, as you might today, the idea is there's some fundamental building blocks when you're thinking about a solution and a way to protect your data. You're going to learn a lot of information today, slightly different take on things, but I wanted to at least cover it from this side of things. So obviously the first building block here is knowing what you're protecting, where it is, and what priority it has in your organization, right? You don't want to protect all your data the same way. It doesn't have the same level of business value, right? So when you think about protecting it, what you're really trying to understand is, what data do I need to get back first? In my consulting career, I spent a lot of time working with customers to help them prioritize tiers of data, where it would live, how it could be stored in the production environment, and then, okay, when I go to recover it, how long do I have to recover those things? You need to understand where your data lives, but as I talk about on the next slide here, it's a little bit different change from the Vast side of things. The thing that's changed in the last couple of years, building block number 2, is protecting your backups. It used to be you could put stuff on tape, you knew it was secure. Well, now you put it on disk or flash, depending on what you might be using as your backup target. You're not sure about that anymore. Many times I convinced customers to actually call their backup service backup 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Right? We had targets that were called backup libraries or backup targets. The problem with that is once you call something backup in today's world, you are giving your ransomware attackers or your rogue admins clear targets to go after. And the reality is today, the attackers, before they do anything in your environment, they change your backup structure, right? Whether it's deleting data, changing your retention times, making it really hard for you to recover that data when you need it most. So we're kind of taking a little shift here and thinking, how do you protect the backup data as well as all of your production data that's out there? Right? The reality is you have to be successful 100% of the time in order to say, yeah, we're secure, versus the attackers only have to being successful one time, right? So they have much better odds of being able to figure out how to get into your data. So you have to make sure you're protecting things effectively. A little bit of the consulting side of me again, run books. Really terrible to think about all the documentation people should be doing and probably don't. But when you talk about a ransomware attack, there is definitely a series of things you need to document. But you also want to make sure you've got multiple copies of that run book. I've had too many customers who actually have been hit by ransomware who found out their recovery plan was included in that attack. They had actually no idea where to even start because everything they had planned for and prepared and documented was actually encrypted or wiped out as part of the attack. So basic rule of thumb, if you develop your run books, make sure you print a copy of it and then store the copies, electronic versions of it, multiple places so you have a chance to actually recover that. Here's my last bullet point here, right, in terms of preparing your plan. It's one thing to say, yep, I've gone through all the preparation, I've protected my backups, I know what I have to recover, what order I'm going to recover it in, I've documented all of that, and then you just hope, right? Too many of my customers in the consulting world actually didn't bother to actually go and test it and make sure they could get their data back. Or if they did test, they took the same mentality they might have taken under disaster recovery, which was, oh, I'm going to plan for my recovery test. I'm going to ship my tapes. I'm going to isolate my data. I'm going to build my network ahead of time. I'm going to tell everyone it's happening, and you plan for it that way. That is not the right way to test for ransomware attacks and recoveries, right? So as part of our conversation here, we're going to talk a little bit about how Vast is really changing the game when it comes to ransomware recovery. right? So as I mentioned, and Mike, who's going to join me here, will give a little more detail technically in terms of what we're talking about here. So the first thing I want to point out is I mentioned tiers of data previously. We here at VAST actually think that you no longer need to have tiers of data when it comes to actually your production environment. Our all-flash platform is designed to eliminate storage tiers on the production world by actually making it economically viable to have performance, scale, and security for your most high-intensive workloads all the way down to your archive. So we're talking about VAST in the context of being a backup target here, but ultimately that same model that you might purchase for backup is actually the same model we'll sell into a high-performing compute cluster, right? So it's important to understand that because we actually think that our approach to backups and our security-minded approach to it stems from our ability to actually think about production storage as well, right? So it's the same solution that does both of the production as well as the backup environment. So we talk about protecting the backups, right? Clearly you want to be able to secure against ransomware as well as the rogue admins, right? It does happen in your environment when someone gets frustrated and actually has access to things and starts deleting stuff, right? So object lock and indestructible snapshots are part of our approach to be able to protect the data itself once you've done your backups. Right now, obviously, your backup application has security parameters built into it as well, whether it's multi-factor authentication, it's workflow authorizations and things in that. But usually it's a multi-tiered approach to security in the backup world, and we are clearly part of that solution. When we talk about testing the environment, Mike will go through this a little bit as well, our architecture gives you the ability to test recovery scenarios without impacting production, right? So we have the compute and performance capabilities via our disaggregated shared architecture, disaggregated shared everything architecture, gives access to the data in multiple network segments. You can actually segment the networks out to be able to give access for test purposes while not impacting production. I'm going to depend on Mike to help me go walk through that a little bit more detail. And then finally, we want to talk a little bit about what happens when you get attacked, right? So now you've tested it, you know your data is protected, but what actually happens? What if you didn't actually have to run a series of restores to get the data back? Again, having dealt with multiple customers hit by ransomware previously, if you think about a purpose-built backup appliance and its ability to recover data from slow-spinning disks, you actually end up with significant bottlenecks trying to get data back. If you had to restore hundreds of terabytes, it might take you hundreds of days. I had one particular customer of mine who had a very large spinning disk solution. It took them over 8 weeks to recover 100 terabytes of data. That's not practical for most of the customers that are out there, right? So from the VAST side of things, we really think we've come up with a solution that actually can change the game and actually help you from a ransomware recovery perspective. So with that, I'm going to ask Zolla to step in, please.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, great update. And when we really start looking at, I mean, there was a lot of vendors on today, right, walking through their solutions. As you can see from the logos on the right, we work with all of them, and some of them aren't even on there that we actually work with. We're standard NFS S3 protocols, and really what we're trying to highlight here is we're changing the perceptions, right, outside of just scale, right? I mean, if you think about it for a minute, backup is getting more and more complex as we go ahead and we work through the backup ecosystem. I want to simplify my back end, my storage, my management of that system so that I don't have isolations or pools of storage that I have to go figure out and try to scale as my data continues to grow, right? That integration we have is with all the vendors we see on the slide here, and speed, right? I will be the only vendor that will come and tell you that when you back up to VAST, I will guarantee you can recover faster, right? We can actually restore data faster out of our system than we can put it in, right? And that's magnitude's different, right? We will be 50 times faster than anybody else in the market when it comes to recovering our data, any piece of that data that you've actually backed up into the backup environment and is stored on a VAST system. The efficiency, right? It's unprecedented, right? Typically, when you deal with a back-end storage that you're writing backup data to, they either want you to turn on deduping compression for the array by itself so that they can store and be optimizing what's actually coming in. We actually take a different approach. We can give you that flexibility to be able to keep your backup software's deduplication on. And then what we will use is adaptive chunking and variable segments, right, inclusive of similarity hashing that will give us even more efficiency when storing data. So you can actually back up data, say, with a backup software Commvault, get 3-to-1 dedupe on your first pass backup, and we'll get another 1.5, 1.8, or 2-to-1 reduction on top of that, right? We also play within the mainframe space with our partners Model 9 and Luminex, and protection, right? When we start looking at this, yes, we need indestructible snaps, we need replication, we need resiliency, and we also need the ability to have those multiple nines of stability. And as our system grows, those number of nines continue to increase from a reliability and a resilience perspective. Now, when we go and we look at protecting backups, and Jeff talked a little bit about, it's no longer just eject a tape and it's protected, right? We look at a couple things. First thing we'll look at is S3 object lock. Now, we can do this on the VAST system itself, right, where we can go ahead and create an object lock with governance and or compliance mode set. So as objects come into the system, they are set and locked and not changeable. We also have the ability to go ahead and integrate this with some of our backup vendors, right? So now from a data protection perspective, we can create the S3 bucket, and our backup vendors will actually go ahead, like Commvault and others, be able to come in and take S3, right, and write to us via S3, and they can control the locking and the pruning on the back end. Right. We also have that flexibility with indestructible snapshots, and I can use them together. So I not only can use S3 object lock, but I can also create snapshots on those object locks, and giving me that capability now to do a belts and suspenders like approach when it comes to the bad actor in the scenario that may have gotten into my backup software, but now I'm actually doing indestructible snapshots to keep them from deleting things in the back end. And on the right, you'll see network segmentation and air gap. I have the flexibility, and we could go into a lot of detail with our physical architecture, but the way in which it's set is, Jeff said it best, we have a disaggregated share everything architecture. But we also have the ability on the front end to pool off those systems and give different views and different access to the data below it. By doing this, I now can create a system that can be leveraged for my clean room. It will dedupe against itself and give me that flexibility to go ahead and create an air gap solution by a network segmentation and so on, where I can push that into another environment, read, scan, and go ahead and validate that everything's up, running, and functioning without touching any of the production side of my data. When I then go ahead and look at the actual testing of a solution, right, we're looking at things like instant operations, right? I want to test often. I want to make sure that I have the ability to bring things on and go ahead and restore certain key pieces of data. Well, with VAST, remember I told you it's the fastest recovery product in the market. It also has the ability to do things in place, meaning I don't need to have another space to run my validations. I can run them right off of the VAST system to test, validate, scan, and run my backup application scans straight from the VAST system, right? I have ransomware scans. Now with the speed in which I can read the data in its native format, I could actually scan my backup data and not have to choose subsets of that data to go ahead and test, validate, and scan. I have the ability now to make sure that I can scan everything within my estate, not just portions of it. And then recover in place, right? I have the ability to recover in place. Most often when you have a cyber attack, you're still trying to fix your primary storage arrays, but you need something at performance and at scale to be able to start recovering and bringing your business back online. With VAST, we have that capability to restore in place without moving any data and still give you the performance back, and do this at an unparalleled level, in that it's not just about bringing on VMs and turning them on. It's actually running I/O and working through those capabilities. Now, we talk a lot about scale, we talk a lot about size, and I want to leave you more with a picture of what that would look like, right? So on the next slide here, we have, let's take 5 petabytes of usable capacity, right? When we go ahead and we look at that, I'm looking right now at about a half rack used of space, right? This is a VAST 4x5. Okay, I have the capability to go ahead and look at the space, power, and cooling associated with it, which is going to be smaller than anything else in the market based on this dense form factor. If we assume that we can get 1.5 to 1, we're looking at, just under 10 petabytes of effective capacity. If we get 3 to 1 from our backup and 2 to 1 from VAST, which is typically what we see, now you're looking at a half rack holding 4.8 petabytes of data, right? If we look at the backup performance, we're looking at 73 terabytes an hour for backup and 54 terabytes an hour for restore. And I apologize, the slide on the right where it says 4.97, those are supposed to be petabytes, not terabytes. There's a typo on the slide. And I also threw in the backup performance and recovery performance. I put in the gigs a second. And really, that's going to help you truly understand when you do things for live recovery or instant access running off of the system. Now you're looking at the throughputs that you can see from an I/O generation perspective on that back end to run your production applications, right? This is something that is unparalleled from a performance perspective and giving you that capability to use a primary storage all-flash array that you would expect to run your mission-critical applications on. Now we're using it for data protection with zero compromise. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over. Yeah.
Actually, I want to highlight a little. Highlight a little bit in terms of why you would do that, right? So from a flash perspective, most backup admins go, hey, I know this is too expensive. I can't afford to do this, right? And as Mike pointed out, our deduplication capabilities does change the economics of the solution. But I also, if you think about where we're highlighting here on this previous slide, the idea that you can actually run backups and run your production environment in parallel on the same solution at really no storage cost, right? So the ability for us to deduplicate the data between the backup environment and the production systems you'd be running, not permanently, right? Again, we don't recommend you run production and backup on the same cluster if you can avoid that. But in the event of an attack, the idea is you might not be able to recover this back to your primary systems because they're going through forensics, or you don't know what's been corrupted and where people, these hackers may still live. So being able to segregate the data, run it on the same platform, give full access and full performance to that really does differentiate us in the backup space, right? There's no other solution out there today that can make that claim. And it does actually create a different use case around this because you can actually make sure as part of that testing that you can access your data. You can spin it up live, whether it's through your backup application using a live mount or an instant recovery functionality, or actually using some other tool to store that data in native format. You have lots of flexibility with our architecture and our performance that allows you to really think about protecting and recovering the data from a different angle. So I just wanted to highlight that again because I think that's really a key message here that we wanted to reinforce as we go through this. So with that, I think curious if there are any questions out there. I don't see any in the chat.
We got a lot of good questions. Now, I'm going to move the
Okay.
slide over. Yeah, we're ready to jump in. I'm going to move the slide over to a poll, though, because we do want to ask the audience here what additional information they would like to get about the VAST data solution. So, we breezed through a lot of information, and all of you have taken in so much today. There is so much information coming your way. And no matter how interesting and exciting it is, and it is, you're not going to remember it all. You just won't. So click on the, now I feel like you're out there going, challenge accepted, Jess. But don't write me essays and reports on everything you learned today. Instead, click on the poll and let the team know how they can follow up with you, what information would be helpful to jog that memory later and remind you of all the cool stuff that we were just hearing about. So while you guys are doing that, we are going to jump into some questions. You guys ready for some Q&A?
Yes, let's
Definitely.
do it.
Let's do it. All right. Do I need to do anything special or specific with my Commvault environment to take advantage of VAST?
I can take this one, Jeff. So there's absolutely nothing you need to do that's unique or modifies your environment. The value you're going to get out of that is I'm simply going to point it to a new S3 bucket and a new location that I'm backing up to. The value you'll get, though, operationally is that moving forward, as you grow or lock DDBs and so on within that Commvault environment, there's no space or overhead penalty on your back-end storage system. So now you'll have the flexibility to go ahead and make modifications and changes that necessarily you weren't able to make in the past without chewing up more space as you seal that DDB. And try to free up some of the object lock and let that stuff age out.
That's interesting. And you mentioned the economic impact a little bit before as well. Is that, this question has come up a few times today with folks kind of saying, how do I pitch this? How do I bring this to my leadership team? What's the key differentiator that I'm using to say this is why this is the solution for us? Is it, would you say that's economic or what would be the kind of key thing that you would say is what everyone should be running to their leadership team to say, this is why we need to go with VAST?
So I always start.
It's go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead.
So I like this one because, again, I'm old. So if you think back to where Data Domain was in the kind of the mid-2000s, and I know, Mike, you got some personal experience there as well, they did a really good job of shifting people from tape to disk. They solved the problem of being able to back up data efficiently and store it on disk with deduplication, right? Deduplication made it viable for them to do that. We are now, 20 years later, doing the exact same thing for flash, right? So from an economics perspective, deduplication is a big piece of that. But now the question is, what else do we have to go and talk about, right? Because ultimately, most CIOs won't pay a premium for restoring data faster. So when we talk about how we help our customers and how we help position that, it really is what use case are you trying to solve for? If you are trying to solve for backup and restore from 15 years ago, where I wanted to recover one system, one file, one database, okay, there's probably other solutions out there that might make sense. But the reality is today's world is you're planning for worst case scenario, recovering lots of systems in parallel, because ransomware functions differently than, oh, hey, I accidentally deleted some email, or I deleted that table space, can you restore it for me? That's the world we live in today, which is being able to recover lots of data in parallel. VAST does that. But now you take it beyond just, hey, it's also backup, or it just does backup and recovery, and to be able to say, okay, we've got some additional things in the bag that allow us to think about VAST as something else, right? Being able to run in systems during a recovery scenario where you're, again, everything's down, you don't want to put data back to where it came from originally because you just don't know what type of security breaches are there. Now you can isolate it on the VAST system and run it there in the meantime. Therefore, you're not out of business for days or weeks. You're out of business for seconds and minutes as you get things back up and running and reconnect the network. It's a very different story that we are able to tell to leadership out there because of that approach. So, Mike, I know I talked over you. Anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, that was great, Jeff. I mean, it's both that value of recovery, the scalability of it, manageability too. right? I mean,
Mm.
if you look at systems that have a ceiling on how big they can grow, which ours does not, it means I'm bringing another device within my environment, which is another thing to manage, and it's an isolated pool in most cases, right? So the more pools that I have of isolated storage that I'm actually writing to for backup, it's more things that I have to ship backups between, determine which clients get backed up where, and also make sure that my admins, which we know they're all the best in the business, right? But my admins have set up all those systems correctly each time they set up a new system.
All right. Well, I think you've given everyone out there a lot of good arguments to bring to their team. So that at least makes it an easy pitch, an easy yes. I'm going to sneak in one more question here from our audience. When you say you scan for ransomware, what criteria do you use to scan something that fits the definition of ransomware?
So for that, we're going to leverage our third-party backup software, the vendors that I showed on the earlier slide that are writing to us. Commvault has a great solution for that. Veeam has a great solution for that. And they use their ransomware capability, we have the capability to allow them, since they're writing to us in their native format, to scan us for that. It's not something native to VAST today. You'll see some things from VAST in the near future where we'll make that easier for those third-party backup vendors to go ahead and scan and look at things like taking the data that they've written to us in a natural database-like look and feel, and us to be able to provide them the information they're looking for so they know where to target their scans as well.
Perfect.
Yeah, to expand on that.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Most of those solutions today have a sampling approach, right? Because they know the data is being stored on a slower platform, whether it's, deduplicated data on spinning disk or whatnot. They do a sampling set, right? So the reality is maybe they sample 10%, 20%, 30%. That means there's a lot of data they aren't actually looking at. With VAST, because we're able to read data so quickly, they can actually scan the entire data set. So we've eliminated that sample and the kind of the exposure that comes with that sample because of our architecture.
Amazing. Okay. Well, I wish we could keep going because there's obviously lots more to dig into here, but I think we're going to have to leave it. Before I let you guys go, though, for somebody out there that is really excited, that does want to jump in with VAST, what do you recommend as that first step to exploring the VAST data solution? You know what? I'll kick it. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Jeff, you say something first.
Yeah, of course. So I think the best place to go actually is on our website. We actually have live people monitoring the chat. So and actually they have connections to pretty much everyone in the company. So if there's questions you have, we're always available there to answer any of the questions and provide any information you might need from us.
Amazing. Anything else you want to add?
No, thank you very much for the time today. This was a great event.